All right, let us go. So, welcome to a visual exploration of some important elements about Purim that should surface from some, I think, important and interesting images that we will show you. So, our story tonight begins in a place in Syria that is called Dura Europus. And I put here on the map where Dura Europus is relative to Yerushalayim. And as you can see, Dura Europus is very much east of Yerushalayim. So if you wanted to face Yerushalayim, you would be facing west when going to Eretz Yisrael. And indeed, in general, we know when we learn the Talmud Bavli that they refer to Eretz Yisrael as Ma'arava, as to the west, because the Talmud Bavli is being produced in Iran and Iraq, which is further east of Dura Europus. This is right on the Euphrates River in modern-day Syria today. And about 90 years ago, archaeologists came to this place, and it was nothing. It was covered with sand. For hundreds of years, it was covered with sand. They were able to tell that there was once a city here, and so they did an exploration of the area to see what was in this ancient city. And they dug and they uncovered and they found many different buildings and homes. And as they are usually, what they usually do in this situation is they try to guess and try to figure out what each house served as. And what they basically figured out was that this was a place that was destroyed in a war many years ago. It was destroyed in a war. And we're going to look at one of the rooms that they discovered. One of the rooms that they discovered looked like this. So as you can see, there's a lot of wall paintings, otherwise known as frescoes, all around. And these are all scenes from Tanakh. So the question became, so what was this? So it could have been, and very often the assumption was that this is a Christian sort of house of worship, where they too celebrate images that come from Tanakh. But what was interesting is that all of the images come from Tanakh, not anything additional from later books that other religions have added on. That was one noteworthy thing. But in addition to that, you'll notice that right in the middle of the room, there is a niche that has two bluish columns. In other words, that's a big centerpiece in the room. And here is a closer up of this centerpiece. And what you see on the top left of this centerpiece is a menorah. And not only a menorah, this is one of the examples of a menorah where the branches are ba'alachsoi, which is the way it was in the Rambam's image. Now, to be sure, there are actually 3 menorahs in this shul. Only this one, the main one, the one above the Aron Kodesh, is presented ba'alachsoi. The other 2 are presented as semicircles. So, number one, when you're seeing a menorah like that over the center, this is not something that is usual for other religions to do. It's very much a Jewish symbol. And to the right of that, there is a lulav and an esrog. And we know from coinage that was found in this period, meaning like the Bar Kokhba coins, that a lulav and esrog, although it's not this way today, a lulav and esrog were once Jewish symbols. It was just like a Magen David or a menorah or some other things that become, or luchas, are Jewish symbols. A lulav and esrog was also once a Jewish symbol. And to the right of that, it looks like a facade of the Beis Hamikdash. And there are also some coins from when Jews had control of Eretz Yisrael that had this idea on the coin. And to the right of that is the scene of the Akedah Yitzchak. So for these reasons, the assumption became that this was a shul. That this was a shul where Yidden davened in. And further exploration went something like this. This was built around the year 244 of the Common Era. Just to give you a feel for what does that mean. So this is smack in the middle of the time of the Amoraim. The first generation of the Amoraim were pretty much operating at this time. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi had passed away 2 decades before this, or something like that. And it's the first generation of the Amoraim, both in Eretz Yisrael and in Babel. The Jewish year is actually really interesting because the year 240 of the Common Era was the year Dalet, meaning Dalet Alafim. The year Dalet Alafim. That was the year. This is about 200 years after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, a little less than 200 years after the Churban Beis Hamikdash. However, this building did not survive for a long time. Why did it not survive for a long time? Because it was in Syria, which was controlled by the Romans. But it was at the Euphrates River, which is the border between the Parthian Empire and the Romans, and the Parthians attacked, and when the excavators, they dug in this room, they found the whole thing was full of sand. This room was right up against the wall of the city. So the assumption is, the guess is, that in order to fortify the wall, they filled up this whole room with sand, and then the city was destroyed, and then because of the sand, it protected this, and that's why it was discovered about 100 years ago. Now what happened was that the regime in Syria took all the pictures off the wall and put it in a museum in Damascus. And in Eretz Yisrael, in Tel Aviv, there's a museum, the Bet Hatzfusos Museum. They made a replica of some of these paintings. We're interested, for the purposes of today, in one painting. And it's one painting, the one I just highlighted, that's right to the left of the Aron Kodesh. Presumably it's the Aron Kodesh. I should pause here and say that what would the Amoraim, Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, what would they, who lived at this time, what would they have said about a shul that had so many pictures on the wall? You have to assume that they would have been against this, because, first of all, besides for the long-standing questions about what is permissible and what is not permissible in terms of a Jew making pictures, which is another subject for another time, we touched on it in a previous class, but in addition to that, having images in a shul like this is probably not very conducive for kavanah. And so it is very possible that this is not something that would have been appreciated or tolerated by the Chachamim. Not all of the Yidden listened to the Chachamim. But this is very interesting because we have an image right to the left of what was presumably the Aron Kodesh, which means it's taking up prime real estate. And we're going to have to ask ourselves, why is that? I don't know if I have a good answer. Why is this, from all the pictures, the one that they're choosing to highlight so strongly? What is this image to the left of the Aron Kodesh? Is this. All the way on the left is a man sitting on a horse, and it seems like this is Haman, who's leading a beardless Mordechai on the white horse. In the middle, meaning moving a little to the right, there are four people. There are four people wearing Roman dress, togas, who are saying hi to you. So you can say hi back. And then, to the right of that, there is a man on a throne, who presumably is Achashverosh, who's being handed or is receiving, or either he's receiving or he's giving, a note to some sort of courier, which may be a reference to the notes that are going on in the Gzeiros that are going on in the story of Purim. And to the right of, meaning further to the right, is further behind, seems to be a queen with a big crown on her head. Presumably that is Queen Esther. Okay, so you have over here an image of Purim, and fine, so it's an image of the story of Purim. The interesting thing is, why is this taking center stage right there at the Aron Kodesh? It's an interesting question, and it would seem b'pashtos that the idea of a triumph in Galus. Here you're talking about a Jewish community in Galus. They're in Syria, not too far, by the way, from where the story of Purim happened.
That's why I think it was there, because it's not too far. They all could relate.
They could relate very much, and in fact, if they went to the roof of their shul, they could see the Persians, literally. And on the other hand, they're living in a different area. But I would like to angle it toward the idea of survival in Galus, the idea of, there's a lot of miracles. Hanukkah is the Eretz Yisrael story. It's a victory in Eretz Yisrael, and that's beautiful. And Mitzrayim is also about leaving Mitzrayim and going to Eretz Yisrael. But the idea of overcoming our enemies within Galus, when Akati Avdi Achashverosh Shanan, we could still work it out and ride the horse and have Haman lead us on the horse. I think that's kind of a message that kind of resonated for Jews in this type of climate. Maybe this is the reason why they give it center real estate. But I want to call your attention.
Was this like a front show?
I don't know. We don't know anything.
It's a little bit of an interesting picture to have in the show, no?
Yes.
Especially for such a long time now.
What year?
Which part are you specifically referring to?
There's a woman in there that has a beard. To have this,
yeah. So first of all, I'll say like this. Back up. First of all, to even have an image in a shul, I think would have been out of bounds for multiple reasons. And number two, on top of that, you get into the discussion of in terms of the look. For example, Mordechai is here without a beard, so you can have that discussion. This is 244. 244. Did they want it that way? Maybe. Did they have beards? We know that there were always Jews who were right? Or a little more Hellenizing type of Jews. And is this a community that's somewhat like that? Very possible. I don't know if there's a way to definitively know. It's also interesting that Mordechai's eyes over here seems to have been knocked out. It's very interesting. No one knows exactly why. So it's facing west. It's clearly a Jewish room from all the symbols. There's a niche in the west-facing thing, so you can't say definitively. You could say it was used for adult education. I don't know, but no one really knows for sure. No one really knows for sure.
What does a non-pro mean in the
Yeah. No, what he means, what the question Levi is asking is the whether they regard themselves as Mishnah and Talmud observant. I guess you would say.
Is there halachically, it's not a fear, just art. Is there issue having art in the show?
So we spoke at a previous class. We spoke about general art and general is a halachic discussion. So then on top of that, in that discussion, one of the things was, and even putting aside that problem, there's the issue of kavana. There's the issue of kavana, which comes up in the machzorim.
We see it in machzorim that you've shown art.
Right, and some people made.
I don't see this as an issue. It's just in our days, you're like, wow, because we're Ashkenaz.
Some people made a macha against that too, in the machzorim.
You've shown us tons of art from that.
Yes.
That period.
Well, not from this bit. This is actually unique. I've never shown you. This is a lot earlier, about 1,000 years earlier.
We've seen this.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue. So I want to focus a little more on the Achashverosh part of the throne. Here is with a little bit of a different lighting. I hope you're able to notice that there seems to be things on the steps of Achashverosh's throne. And in fact, if you look really well, you should be able to see on the bottom left, it definitely looks like a face of a bird or a duck. And on the top right step, there also seems to be the wings and the face of a bird. And the question is, this is not a very usual thing, to have birds on the steps of a throne. What is going on over here?
Is that a line in the second step?
Oh, and it does look like possibly, although it's not 100% clear, that it's a line on the second step. So what's interesting about this? And this is where these images, for me at least, come to life. To me, Torah Shebiksav, in and of itself, it almost sometimes doesn't feel Jewish enough, right? But Torah Shebiksav, together with Torah Shebal Peh, that's us. And this is l'chayra what's happening here. Why? There's a medrash in Esther Rabbah. Esther Rabbah was a medrash that was quoting the rabbis who are living at this time period in this same region. And it describes over here how Achashverosh wanted to sit, Ba Leishev al Kisei Shloima, he wanted to sit on Shlomo Melech's throne. Shlomo Melech's throne was taken into Golus. And Achashverosh got his hands on it. He wanted to sit on it, but his advisors told him that he can't do so. Amrullah, and they said, Kol melech she'enoi kozmikrator ba'olam, any king who's not a kozmikrator in the world, this means someone who doesn't, let's break down this word a second. Kozmikrator, cosmos means the world, and democrat, bureaucrat means government. So a cosmocrat is a person who rules over the whole world. So this word is a Greek word, cosmocrat, and then you just add the extra or for fun. So a cosmocrat, if you're not a cosmocrat, which means if you don't rule over the entire world like Shlomo did, you're not allowed to sit on the throne. So Amad v'asal kisei mishloi kid musai. He emulated Shlomo's throne. Now, what does it say about Shlomo's throne? If you look in Malachim, it said that on the steps, it had 6 steps, and on the steps there were lions. There is no mention of eagles. However, this medrash and this medrash only, not the psukim, darshans on the pasuk v'yadais mizeh malachim, that when Shlomo Melech was Allah b'mayla harishayna v'hari poshet lo yad, the lion would help him up. Uvishniya, on the second step, nesher poshet lo yad, you had the eagle el mokaim hasheves, to the place where he would sit. So in other words, this image over here, in 2 ways, is conveying an idea from Torah Shebal Peh, from the medrash. Number 1, that Achashverosh had a replica of Achashverosh had a replica of Shlomo Melech's throne, and number 2, that this that Hagufa Shlomo Melech's throne not only had lions but also had the eagle. So this is a unique feature in this thing that wouldn't have come across for someone just reading the Tanakh, but was specifically alive for Jews as they try to celebrate the story in their way. And that pretty much finishes the first scene of this narrative.
Was Achashverosh not a cosmocrat?
Achashverosh, was he a cosmocrat, is a good question. We have to look at the Mefarshim on the Medrash to see why they say why yeah or why no. Okay, moving right along, we now jump ahead 1,000 years to the year 1238 of the Common Era. 1238 is actually also another cool year because this is 2 years before the year Hay. The year 12 was the year Hay, Pashat the year Hay. Now we're right. Hay, Tavshin, Hay days, and it was just Hay. So this is a long time ago. And there's a Tanakh. This is in a university library in Poland today. And this Tanakh was written by a sofer by the name of Kloinimus, and we know that because he has his name in the colophon of the book. It's the entire Tanakh. What's interesting about this Tanakh, if you're able to see, it's Pasuk Targum, Pasuk Targum, Pasuk Targum, which means as follows. You know, a few years ago when they came out with the Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum books, you may have thought that this is like a new innovation where people are lazy. They don't want to go Chumash, Targum, Chumash, Targum. So they made Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum books. Well, guess what? It's existed for a very, very long time. Because this Chumash is Chumash Targum in consecutive flow. It has the Pasuk, the Targum. The reason, presumably, is because at this time, we know that in Ashkenaz, they were still doing Targum in Shul. Which means, although no one spoke Aramaic, the Talmudic custom of having a Baal Koyre read a Pasuk and then a Meturgaman teaching it in Aramaic was still happening at this time. It stopped a while after this period. And so therefore, it's not surprising to find a Chumash, a Tanakh, that gives the entire thing Pasuk Targum, Pasuk Targum. There is one image in this entire Tanakh, and this is the only image. Very interesting. That is the only image in the entire Tanakh, is this image that we have over here. What do we see over here? What do you guys see? Gallows. So you see the gallows with a whole bunch of people who are hanging on the gallows, and then there are royal figures on the bottom. So let's take a closer look first at the royal figures who are at the bottom. So here you see, first is Esther. It says on top of her, Kesar Malchus Berosh Esther. And to the left of her it says, Haterezov Dola Rosh Mordechai Yehudi. So it's Mordechai and Esther, both pointing. But remember what they're pointing to. They're pointing to the people who are on the gallows. Esther is in front of Mordechai because Esther is the one who gets them executed, who asks that the 10 sons of Haman be hung on the gallows. So that's presumably why they put her first. But let's take a closer look now at the people who are hanging on these gallows. This is all the way at the top. And what you can see is, what do you see happening? Okay, so there's a vulture that's consuming Haman's flesh. Now there are little words right behind Haman. I'll read it for you. It says, Haman Gimel Amin. Haman Gimel Amin. Okay, let's zoom in at a lower area of the picture. On the left side, it says, Parshandasa Gimel Amoitz. To the right, it says, Ben Kol Echad Ve'echad Amma. Under that it says Dalfon Gimel Amin. On the left it says Aspasa Gimel Amin. Here's the bottom of the tree. It says Vaisasa Gimel Amin. And then the words all the way at the bottom at the root say Tlas Ampin Amin Ba'ara. What is going on over here? What is this? So what's interesting about this image is we do learn in the Megillah Haman was hung. We do learn in the Megillah that the 10 sons of Haman are hung. In this image we see a few chidushim. Number one, it's not a gallows, it's a tree. Number two, all 11 of them are on the exact same tree. So the fact that it's not a gallows and it's a tree, I actually haven't found any sources in Chazal that say that. In other words, V'pashtus, the language of the Megillah is Yasu Eitz Gavoya Chamish Mama, right? Make one, erect one. It doesn't sound like it's a tree. It sounds like Haman built something. So it doesn't really sound like it's a tree. So I don't have an explanation for why this is a tree.
You can't put the art the other way.
No, my question is, why is it green? Why is it green? I'll show you another one soon. Why is it a tree as opposed to a gallows? But yes, so that's chiddush number one that I don't have a mucker for, is the concept of a tree over a gallows. But then,
where's gallows made out of trees? I can maybe take a tree,
trim
up all the branches and.
Okay, but as you're going to see,
stuff you're gonna get.
Could be, but I'm going to show you that not only here. There are other ones that are elaborate trees with good greenery and whatever, like rich greenery. We'll see. I don't know. It definitely was a pattern. You see, there's a few of these images. Okay, but there are mekoides in Chazal for the idea that all 10 and Haman were all hung on the same gallows that you do have in Chazal, and this is reflecting that. So let's go to the source, and then it's going to also clarify what this 3 Amma business is as follows. So we have Targum Sheni LeEsther. What's Targum Sheni LeEsther? When you open the Megillah, if you're looking at the Makros Gedolos, it's going to have the Targum on the left of the Megillah. This is a Targum, one Targum. But we have what's called Targum Sheni, a second Targum. Right? What's a Targum Sheni? It's also an Aramaic rendering of the story of the Megillah. However, it's much more elaborate. It's not like Samud to the text. It's not a direct translation. He'll go off and have 3, 4, 5 paragraphs of Medrash woven in to the Targum, which is why it's a much longer Targum. We don't know exactly when this Targum was written, but it's part of the Midrashim that we have on Purim, and many of the Makoides of the story come from the Targum Sheni. And in Targum Sheni it describes as follows. It says, Haman itzlav tlasa amin. Haman took up on his, when he was hung, 3 amos. Parshandasa rachik minei amsa chada. Parshandasa was 1 amma distant from him. Parshandasa himself also took up 3 amos. And then Dalphine was 1 amma away from him. Dalphine took up 3 ammas. Aspasa was away from him 1 amma. And it goes on. And it basically gives the calculation of each one. And then it says, Vaizasa, who's the last son, Rachik Minei Amsa. He was 1 amma distant from the guy who was above him. Dehu Asiran, he was the last one. He's the 10th one. Vahut Sliva Mishaka Ba'ara Tlas Amin. And the piece of wood, the gallows, was embedded into the earth 3 ammas. And Vaizasa, who's the lowest son, have a rachik tlas amanara. He is 3 ammas away from the bottom of the tree. Okay, and so therefore the whole thing is 47 amma, and Haman is at the top, so it equals the chamishim amma. That Zeresh said to Mordechai. So here, let me just give you the math the way I understand it. You're dealing here with 11 bodies, 3 ammas each equals 33 amma. Then you put 1 amma under each one, but times 10 only, because for the lowest one it's a different cheshbon, so that gives you 43 amma. Then under the bottom son, 3 ammas till the earth is 46, and then 3 ammas of the tree in the earth is 49. 49 and 50 is close enough, and I think that's what I'm pretty sure that's what this medrash is saying. This is my understanding, at least, of what's happening over here. So if you go back to the image, that's what the artist is doing. As Menachem said before, really it should have been 1 long thing, but he couldn't do that. You don't have space. He did 1 on the side. So he's rectifying that flaw by writing in, by the way, you should know there was Amma. He's taking this very seriously in terms of showing you the sheer of where everything is and how this works.
It's funny because in the picture they're overlapping.
They are, correct. So what he's writing is not what he's showing. Correct. So what I was thinking about this when I saw there's a few areas where we have from the Rebbe about the idea of every area of space in Kedusha has to be oizki cheshbon. Right? You have, like in the Luchis, there was no extra, in the Oren there was no extra space. There was no extra space. You have in the wagons that were carrying the Inyanim of the Mishkan, there was no extra space. And the Rebbe basically taught how in Kedusha there can be no extra space. In Kedusha everything serves a function, serves a purpose. It's not, just have extra space here. So I was feeling that when I see the Targum Sheni, Pasha giving a cheshbon for every single inch on this Amma, like this tree, this gallows is a function of holiness, because eradicating evil is holy. And there isn't going to be everything extra. Everything has to be accounted for, and if I'm right, so then we learn that we shouldn't have emptiness, and everything should be geared towards a function and a purpose, but also when we're eradicating evil as well. Let me show you another example, and this will bring us to the third part of our presentation. Here again you see the concept of a tree, and you see again the 10 sons together with the Tata Haman. In this case, they're all blindfolded. That may be something you're not able to see, but in this case they're all blindfolded, and that's that. But I've shown you this machzor here before. The last one comes from Tanakh. This one here comes from what's called a Leipzig machzor. If you remember B'Shvuos with the Milchik, it came from this same machzor. This machzor is unbelievable stuff. This machzor is really great, and you're going to see now also just really amazing things. So there are some images on the bottom. We'll discuss the images, then we'll discuss the text.
What is this? Okay.
We'll talk about the text soon. So first, let's look at the images. Can you see what's going on the bottom right? On the bottom right? The bottom right is Haman and Mordechai. Here, we're zooming in a little. What's this?
Zeresh pouring the garbage out.
This is his daughter dumping the toilet on Haman. So this is also a medrash. This is not clear in the text of the Megillah. and they made sure to put this here as Haman is leading Achashverosh on the horse. Haman, for whatever reason, his face is turned toward Mordechai or toward his daughter. The Medrash describes how he looked up, and when she saw his face, then she jumped out of the window. Go back to, you see her on the floor there? Okay? So that whole story is betrayed right there. That's why they made his face turning inward. Now, let's look at more. So Mordechai is going like this. What he's doing with his left hand, I don't know. It looks like he's in the middle of like a karate chop almost with his right and left hand. That I can't tell you. But what's on his shoulder?
Hat.
Oh, what type of hat?
Jewish hat.
A Jewish hat. This is a Jewish hat. Remember, this is created in Ashkenaz in the 1300s. In the 1300s, we know from Jewish and non-Jewish sources in art, the Jews had to wear a hat that had a cone at the top. It was called the Judenhut. So Mordechai has to wear a crown. But he can't leave his Charedish Levush home. He got to go with the Levush, right? When the guy rides a bicycle and he has a helmet, but he has his hat with him, that's what's happening here. No, but really, that's a joke. What I think really what's happening here is the artist is insisting on seeing themselves in the picture here. Mordechai on the horse is us. It's the guy who wears that. And Haman is going to be leading us. And yes, Haman is going to get a dump of urine landing on his head, and our enemies are going to see the same. They're seeing themselves in the picture. They're the ones riding the horse, and the anti-Semites who they're facing are going to be the people who are going to be forced to face that. And I think that's really impressive. That's really nice. The way they made sure that although he's wearing a crown, to put their levush, to put that into the image, because we know from the Baal Shem Tov, obviously a lot later, about Hakodesh Megillah Lemafrei Aloyosa. If you read the Megillah and you don't see yourself in the story, it's just a story of the past. But you don't see the story of the present, which includes our relationship with non-Jews and how we deal with them, and we're going to overcome, and the confidence in that. So then you're not Yotze. And I think we see a hint of that type of attitude in this image over here. That's in terms of this page. Let's go right there to the left-hand page. Remember, here's just the out. Now let's zoom in to inside. On the right side, you see the Yid with his Jewish hat sitting on a bench with Aleph Beis on a panel with 3 children. So clearly this is Mordechai gathering the 3, another one of the most famous midrashim about Purim is that. In the middle is someone waiting with a horse, which I have not been successful in figuring out what that is. And to the left is Achashverosh extending the royal scepter to Esther, and she is touching the Rosh Hasharvit, which is when she when she invites Achashverosh to the Su'udah. Okay, so here's another nice inyan that's not in the Torah Shebiksav, that's not in the Megillah, meaning all the way on the right, in terms of the Mordechai learning with the Jewish boys. But the images, you just say it's just images. But you really, what you need to do is you need to look at the full page and really understand what the artist over here was doing. What are we talking? What is this area of davening? This is it's a machzor. Machzor is used for tefillah. If you look on the left side and you look at there's 2 red lines, complete red lines in the left panel. You able to read what it says there? No? Okay. One says Baruch Atah Hashem as a Rosh Tevis Shover Evim Machnias Eidim. And then right under that it says, Allah Tzadikim V'Allah Chasidim V'Alzik Ne'ancha Beis Yisrael V'Apleitas Seifreim V'Agera Tzaddik V'Aleinu. So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with Shemona Esrei. Go further down, that next red line, Mishon U'Miftach L'Tzadikim. What's happening over here? If you went back to Ashkenaz, in this Kufa, they had many different Isafas for davening on Purim that even Ashkenaz today, I do not believe does. And one of these Isafas were, they had Isafas in Birchas Krishma, and they had Isafas in Birchas Krishma on Purim night, which means tomorrow night, and then they had Isafas the next morning, and in Shemona Esrei as well. And Isafas in Shemona Esrei, it was presumably in Chazar Zashat, where the Chazan would, every single bracha of the 19 brachas had a Isafa, every single one. Now, for most, it was very short. For example, on the left side, Allah Tzadikim V'Allah Chasidim, you see is 4 lines. Under that it says Keser, and it has 4 lines of a piyut, and then the bracha ends. So you're adding just a few lines. And in fact, if you look in these Ashkenazi machzorim, you'll see that for most brachas it's just a few lines. But clearly on the right panel, that's much longer. Why is that? Because what bracha are we in the middle of? V'lam al shinim. What's going to be the main bracha that's going to get the biggest infusion of a Purim theme? V'lam al shinim. Why? The downfall of the wicked. That's a tefillah where we daven for the downfall of the wicked. And so there is a lengthy poem in V'lam al shinim that begins on the previous page, and the highlight is the big words in Vayitlu es Haman. Haman is hanging, and this is what it's all about. And we even know who wrote this piyut, because if you follow the acrostic, you'll see, starting from the Aleph, it says Elazar Biribi, and on the next page, Kalir, Elazar HaKalir. Elazar HaKalir is the one who wrote almost all of the, many of the piyutim that we say until today, on Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, and on the Tanesim, and many of these different tefillahs that we're saying, comes from Elazar HaKalir. He, the Alter Rebbe writes that he was a Tana. There are other sources that seem to imply that maybe he lived a little later, but either way, he's an important person who wrote many of these things, and he put his name into this piyut that seems to have fallen out of use today. And now you understand that the imagery is not random. The imagery of the downfall of Haman and Haman's entire family, he, the 10 children, his daughter, is on the page of V'lam al shinim al tisikva, and on the other hand, on the page of Ala Tzadikim, Ala Chasidim, about good people, what do you have there? You have Esther doing her act of Mesiras Nefesh, going to the king, which could have resulted in her death, and you have Mordechai teaching children, which the Medrash says that was also Mesiras Nefesh. The Medrash says, we learned this in a Maimer on Shabbos, that they came to Mordechai and they said, Haman is coming. They said, Haman is coming. And so Mordechai said, tell all the kids to run away. And the kids said, no, we're staying with you. What do you see from here? You see that it was Mamash in your Mesiras Nefesh. So on the left hand, you have Esther, her Mesiras Nefesh. On the right hand, you have Mordechai and his Mesiras Nefesh. And that's a great fit for the bracha of Allah Tzadikim and Allah Chasidim. So all of a sudden, not just random pictures anymore. It's bringing alive the whole Indian of Purim. It's bringing alive the whole thing. I can imagine someone who's using this machzor, right? The whole thing comes alive. All of a sudden, your neshama goes on fire when you see something like this. And it could at least.
Probably Haman was studying the horse and the gibbon.
Yeah.
You think that's Haman? Oh yeah, it could be. It's Haman. It could be it's Haman because it's the same horse and it's the same clothes.
And he's going to get Mordechai from with the children. That's what.
Okay, to take him on the ride.
Yeah.
Okay, Yashakar. Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah. It makes sense. I think this is Haman who came to pick him up. Which is, the reason it's important to this is because that's when they thought he's coming to kill, which brings out the Mesiras Nefesh, which is why it belongs on this page. So that's good. Yashakar. That's a good example.
It's like a cartoon, like it goes in order. That's the next page.
You read from left to right or from right to left to right, which is interesting because it's not the Jewish way. But then you get to the question of, as much as our art, are they used to looking at things? Because like when they're reading out in the world, they're reading left to right in art. That's an interesting observation. May have been a goy, but clearly you see this is. I call this. I don't care who painted it. To me, this is Jewish, right? Because in theme, it's Jewish, right? It's conveying Jewish ideas in a uniquely Jewish way. So I don't care about the nature of the art.
That way, does that after Haman?
Yeah. It's going left to right. It's definitely going left to right. Yeah. All right. Let's go weiter. Okay. Now we're going to move into the next phase. This is the way we're used to seeing a Megillah Esther. We're used to seeing it look like this. The Megillah on the right, the Rebbe printed a Sefer HaToldos of the Rebbe Marash. And when he printed a Sefer HaToldos of the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe reproduced a facsimile of 2 columns of the Megillah that the Rebbe Marash had written. The tradition is that he wrote a Megillah for each one of his 3 children, and the one on the right is what he wrote for the Rebbe Rashab. Until today, Chabad Sofrim, when they write a Megillah, they follow this pattern. What's unique about this pattern? 2 things. Number 1, the top word in the right column is Hamadinois, not Hamelech, and that's the source of the Chabad custom not to be have Hamelech on the top of each column. And number 2, the 10 names of Haman's children are not taking up an entire column, but they're all limited to just the top. These are, I can't say it's absolutely unique, but it's relatively speaking unique. And the same size, not bigger. And it has to take up the whole column. So if you're going to make them the whole column, then it has to be huge letters. If you can do it this way, then it can be regular sized letters. Anyway, a number of years ago, there's a Kranite family, or a Lubavitch family, the Kalbach family, meaning Elichaim Kalbach has a number of Lubavitcher daughters. They revealed that they have in their family possession a Megillah that's attributed to the Reb Maharash. How so? Basically, the Reb Maharash had a third son named Mendel. He passed away, I think, in 1940 in the island of Corsica, which was a possession of France, it still is a possession of France. And he had a Megillah, and he gifted it to Zalman Schneerson, who was one of the Einiklach of the Tzemach Tzedek, and who then came to America and lived here. And so his daughter married El Yechaim Kalbach, and so that's how this got into the family. So their tradition is that it's also from the Reb Maharash, and you see that Seres B'nai Haman is actually also written in a similar, though it's not exact, but in a similar way, meaning it's not justified. The left is not justified of the Parshandasa, the Alphain, and Aswasa. There's no attempt to make it justified, but still, it's within the same ballpark. On the other hand, it is a Hamelech Megillah. It is a Hamelech Megillah. So I don't know if there's anyone who's an expert who can sit there and say whether it's 100% confirmed or not confirmed, but it's just an interesting thing, and this is so one's in the Rebbe's library and one's in a possession. Why am I showing this to you? Just to remind you what a regular Megillah looks like before I show you the next thing. Okay, what's the next thing? We're going to look at this Megillah over here, because now we're going to move into artistic Megillahs. And the reason we're going to talk about artistic Megillahs is, till now, let's just remind. I showed you a wall in a shul, I showed you a painting in a Tanakh, and I showed you in a machzor. But the Megillah is a Megillah. Now I'm showing you that there are Megillahs that have decorations, paintings, and art that are in the Megillah itself, which raises the question, is this kosher? Is this allowed? Are you allowed to introduce art into an actual Megillah Esther? Clearly...
Women are allowed to read.
Oh, hold on a second. You're prompting me to my next point. What's more interesting about this Megillah, by the way, is one of the oldest Megillahs that exists. We don't have so many old ones. It's definitely the oldest one that has art in it from the year 1564. Okay? So, not so old relative to other manuscripts that we have. Now, all the way at the end, there is additional writing in the Megillah, which adds the same question. Are you allowed to write personal notes? Let's say during Megillah Esther you come up with a big Kiddush. Are you allowed to write it down with a pencil on your Megillah? Or does that passel your Megillah? What's even more interesting is if you read this Kalafin, what does it say? It says, Anoichi Stelina. I am Stelina, Bas HaKotzin, the daughter of, and it gives her yichus over here, and the date when she wrote this Megillah, as I said before, in the year, which comes out to the year 1564. And by the way, when did she finish it? She writes, Kosafti Zois HaMegillah, V'seyamti Yoisa Yom Gimel Shloisha Yom L'Chodesh Adar. Yeah, the Safrim, they always finish right before Purim. If you ever, when you order, right before Purim, she finishes. Gimel Yosh, it's actually pretty good. Gimel Adar, she finishes Megillah. Is a woman allowed to write a Megillah? Is a woman, so did we get all these questions? So let's look at the halachic sources just for a second. Here you have the Elya Rabbah. The Elya Rabbah is aware of the fact that many Megillahs in his day, he's living in the 1600s, early 1700s, he's aware of the fact that many Megillahs in his day have art in them. Because he writes, the Gama Tziyurim Sha'osim Big Ol Yoinis in the margins of the Megillah, Einei Nachai. He doesn't say Osir, but he says, it's not right. And he writes, Dalechatchila, it's best if you make it like a Sefer Torah, and a Sefer Torah it's Osir. So even though here I'm not going to say it's Osir, but it's best if you don't do this type of thing. Then he gets into a discussion, and maybe it could distract you while you're doing Megillah, which is why there's an issue in having it in a Siddur, but then he says, the truth is in a Siddur you need more Kavanah, Megillah says you need less Kavanah, so he's not so much so sure that's an issue. What do you see from here? You see from here, it's not a random occurrence. This was happening. And you see that even he didn't forbid it, but he did say, it's Einoi Nachai. On the other hand, a little later, 1723 to 1811, we had Rabbi Yishmael of Modena, who was a big Rav in Italy, and he wrote in a tshuva, we're not careful about this. Our custom is to add siyurim and to do engravings around the Megillah. V'harbe oisim kain, and the reason umchavnim liyafoy hamegillah, to make it look nice. Sefer Torah, you're not allowed to do it for Megillah not. Basically, without getting into the discussion, there's a big discussion about how much a Megillah is doima to Sefer Torah. And it's totally, if you could say you could say it's mamish needs to be doima, you could say somewhat doima, and if somewhat, then how much And this is the conversation that the poskim are having, but it's definitely within the conversation that maybe such a thing as mutter. But we don't do it today, but it was definitely something that used to happen.
The belt does it. I've seen Megillah that have art.
Okay,
Yeah.
could be. All right.
Not like
Now, about a woman writing a Megillah, here you have a sefer that's called Megillah Sefer, which is a commentary on the Megillah Esther, printed in the year Taf Ayin, which corresponds to the year 1710, by a rabbi by the name of Moshe Meir Pearls. Moshe Meir Pearls. And on the pasuk that says that Esther wrote the Megillah, remember it says, Vatichtov Esther Hamalka Bas Avichail. So he has a shtickle over here. And he writes as follows. He writes, Nishalti, I was asked, Me'ez, it's on the left side, if you right where it says Va'al Zara on Va'al, so right over there. I was asked from the Goyin HaMeforsam, Va'av Bezdin Tequila Senu Prague, David Oppenheim. Okay, I was asked by the Av Bezdin. What was the Shaila? B'Megillah Asher Kasva Bitoi Morat Sarah. His daughter Sarah wrote a Megillah, and here he says she's the wife of whatever, and he gives her yichus over here. Is im likros betzibur ma'isa Megillah? Are you allowed to read betzibur from this Megillah? This is the shaila that David Oppenheim. This is David Oppenheimer. He was a very wealthy Jew and the chief rabbi of the whole region and Prague. And he asked this Moshe Meir Pearls, who is another Rav, if this is okay. Moshe Meir Pearls goes on to say that I answered it's not okay, and in fact you have to bury the Megillah. Why? Listen, because someone's going to read it, because you don't know it's written by a woman. And he goes on to say that a woman cannot write a Megillah, just like the din is clear that a woman cannot write a Sefer Torah, and so therefore he says this is what he told him. Now, what's really interesting is as follows. Here's a David Oppenheim, and he has a Sefer. His Sefer of Tshuvos is called Nishal David, because that was his name. And it was printed. I don't remember what year the first time it was printed. But he has a tshuva there. Shaila Chavdalad. Look at the heading. Megillah sheksava isha ikshera liklos babetzibur. He has a tshuva about the same thing. And guess what his conclusion here is? His conclusion here is that it's mutter. Okay, and he does not write here in his tshuva that his daughter wrote a Megillah. So it's interesting. He went to a rabbi. He got a psak from him. But then he, either before or after, he wrote his own tshuva, and where he says that it's mutter. And what is his main point over here? He says like this. Look at the Gemara. When the Gemara talks about women cannot write mezuzah, sefer Torah, and tefillin. That's for one reason. Woman doesn't put on tefillin. If you don't put on tefillin, you can't write tefillin. And mezuzah, sefer Torah, and tefillin are all bundled together, and so therefore the din for one applies to the other. Megillah, completely different story. It's never bundled together. In fact, women are involved in the nest. The first Megillah was written by Esther, and so therefore he doesn't think it's a problem. We haven't seen for hundreds of years women do this. So he says that's not a rife. He says, if you have a case where something's easy to do, and we don't do it, that's halakhically significant. You say, we shouldn't be doing X. It doesn't say it's also, yeah, but we haven't done it for 200 years. Is it we shouldn't do it? So he says, is that an argument? Yeah. But when doing X is easy. When doing X is easy, so why, if it's so easy and it's so useful, why didn't we do it? Is that right? There's an issue. He said, a woman writing a Megillah is very hard. Most people, it takes years of training to learn. So why didn't you see it? You didn't see it because no one did the hard task. So the fact that it didn't happen is not evidence, and therefore he says that it's mutter. The bottom line is, it's a machlokas hapoiskim. And how Rabbanim today paskin, I can't tell you, but the reality is that when you look at a Megillah written by a woman with art, all of a sudden you see that it's within the halachic process that this is a type of thing that is possible.
Is there a discussion on the subject? Is there later place to talk about it?
I didn't go too far into it. Yes, later place can talk about it.
Is there still an argument today, or people say that's not allowed?
I don't know if people say not allowed. They'll say, why get yourself involved in machlokes? Just, you know what I mean? It's like, that's probably what's going to end up happening. So, but I don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't follow through on like mamish how the psak works in modern time. Okay, so with that, I want to show you my favorite designed and illustrated Megillah. I just wish that it's written in Italy in the Renaissance, and if you were did a painting in Italy in the Renaissance, and you didn't have putti in your painting, so you're nothing. So you're looking at me, what's putti? Putti is, when you look at art from this kufa, it's like little children that are like chubby without clothes on, except for maybe diapers. That's called putti. What?
cherub.
Yeah, like cherubs. If you didn't have that, it's not a thing. And so this had an influence on Yidden as well. And so this gets into all this type of Jewish art. But you look at it and it's you can imagine a Yidden shul with a Megillah like this. Okay, and then as well you'll see some of the nothing mamish inappropriate. I wouldn't show anything as inappropriate, but whatever. Just a little bit of a trigger warning. Okay, so you have over here this Megillah. Pashut gorgeous. Pashut gorgeous in terms of first of all, the ksav is a very, very nice ksav. And then second of all, just the detail and the color scheme, very, very nice. And basically what happens over here is, on the bottom of every column of Megillah, there's a picture from the Purim story. A basic picture, Haman coming, Haman going, a picture. Now, on the top of the second column is another picture from the Purim story. Those don't interest me so much, because I didn't find anything that's like a unique aha moment from any of those images.
This is a book, not a scroll.
This is a scroll. This is a scroll. This is a scroll. Yeah, this is a scroll. On top of the first column, you see over there a woman who's holding a branch in one hand, and in the other hand, she's holding a bridle. What's a bridle? A bridle is a type of thing you put on a horse to control, right? Though you know the horse wears this thing around his face, and it's how you use it to schlep the horse. Okay. This comes, by the way, from the 18th century. It's not so old. It's from 1750, 10 years before, or 5 years before the Alter Rebbe was born. From somewhere in Italy it was written. We're not entirely sure by whom. What's this bridle doing on top of Vayibi Me'achashverish? And then there's a pasuk there. It says over there 4 Hebrew words under her. What is it? It comes from Mishlei. It says, Dvash matzasa, you found honey, Echal dayaka, eat enough. And the continuation of the pasuk, which it doesn't say there, is Pentis ba'enu, maybe you're going to eat too much, Va'akoisai, and then you're going to throw it up. What's happening over here? What's happening here is as follows. It said before, HaKoyres HaMegillah Mafreya Lo Yotza. A Yid wants to find relevance in the story today. What does this mean to me? So there, I was telling you before, relevance is we're going to overcome our enemies, survival of the Jews, it's going to be good, right? It's an important message. There's also more like avodadik, in terms of how to live day-to-day life. What's the lesson from the first parak of the Megillah? What's the lesson? If you get one of the most obvious lessons that comes from the first parak of the Megillah is the issue of drinking too much. Drinking too much. Look what happened to Achashverosh. He got inebriated. Look what the request that he made, and he lost his wife. And so, you have a pasuk that's Vash Matzasa Echad Echa about doing too much, eating too much, which could easily be applied to drinking too much. In other words, the message here is about temperance. And I read online, and there are other museums that have this, that in this time period, a bridle, the thing that restrains a horse and holds back a horse, was a symbol for self-mastery, was a symbol for control of the nefesh bahamas, control of the animal, just like you use that to navigate the horse. So in other words, the artist here is telling you that the irah to derive from the first thing in the Megillah is, don't be a third, don't be like Achashverosh, don't drink too much, you have to have a skafia, gain discipline in your life. So I like that. I like the idea of giving a message that we can walk home with. And you get this on every other column, you get a message like this. I'm not going to show you each one of them. I'm going to show you 2 or 3 more. Here, you have the story of where Haman is Achar Advarim Eila. Haman is appointed to high office, and he says everyone has to bow to him. What's the pasuk that is given on top of this column? Lifnei shever, before a downfall, yigba leiv ish. The person feels gaiva. In other words, what's it saying? That if you try to push yourself all the way up, what's going to happen? You're going to come crashing all the way down. This is a pasuk in Mishlei. What are the images here? So there is a woman in the middle. I don't care so much about her right now. I'm very interested in the 2 birds on her right and left. What are they? Peacocks. What's a peacock a symbol of? Symbol of gaiva, stretching out, showing your beauty, right? The way they sit there like this. It's saying that's Haman. That's Haman. That's the attitude of Haman, who's saying everyone has to bow to me, and guess what? You're going to come crashing down. So what's the lesson you take to your life when you learn from this? You learn from this. We all have the issue of gaiva. We all have the issue of pride. We all have our peacock wings. Maybe we should bring them in a little. Next one. Here you have where the non-Jews who try attacking the Jews are executed and killed. And what do you have here? This is a symbol that has actually remained with us till today. Is a woman holding Lady Justice. She's holding scales and a sword, which is a symbol of justice. And the pasuk is brought from Mishlei, Peles u'moizne, Mishpat Lashem, balance, and a scale is the way God does judgment. In other words, the lesson here is about ethics and about morality and about midah keneged midah. And the last one is on the pasuk, the end of Megillah, where it says, Doidesh tov la'amoi, v'dover shalom l'chol zarei, peace. And here you have a woman holding an olive branch, which also has come down to us in our day, where on American currency, olive branch is a symbol of peace. So there the message is about peace. Now, once we're on this Megillah, one last highlight about this. Here is the image right under the last column of the Megillah. And what do you have here? You have over here an image, what looks like someone who's giving a drasha to a group of people. He's standing in a pulpit, he's giving a drasha. What does this have to do with the last column of the Megillah? I don't know if this was an intentional pun or if this is amaratzis, I'm not sure. Doirish Tov La'ama, it says about Mordechai, he was Doirish Tov La'ama, he gave good drashas to his people. So they made over here Mordechai giving a good drasha. Okay, we know Doirish Tov La'ama doesn't mean that. Doirish Tov La'ama means that he sought the good of his people, but Doirish can mean drasha. Now, I looked, it wasn't too difficult, I found there's a sefer that says this pshat in the pasuk. Here's a sefer from a rabbi, his name was Reb Rachamim Palaji. He lived in the times of the Reb Marash and the Reb Rashab, and he writes, Doirish Tov La'ama, yeah, he used it. Why? Good drashas, he quotes here a Gemara. So maybe it is an authentic interpretation that could be added to the text. Here's another one of these Megillahs that does imagery. What's interesting about this Megillah here is that the images here aren't hand drawn. What they did is they took parchment, they ran it into a printing press that they had then, they used copper plates to make the imagery, and then they gave it a cipher to fill in. And there's a few copies of these that exist. In terms of the images, I found one image that was interesting over here, and that is under the page of Vashti's execution, you see this. And what's interesting about this is, the truth is, the Megillah does not say that Vashti was executed. The Megillah doesn't say. In fact, many of the Mefarshim tell us that Vashti wasn't executed. What is the lashon of Memuchan is that you should make a gzeira that she shouldn't come before the king. Make a gzeira, but she shouldn't come before the king. What do you need to make a gzeira if you're executing her? So the text actually doesn't. It sounds like she's being banished. Okay, so the Medrash says, and Rashi says, the Gemara says, that no, she was executed. Many of the other Mefarshim say them, Shutta Shemikra, not necessarily. And here you have a very interesting way of executing Queen Vashti. You see her crown has fallen to the floor, and there are two women who are strangling her, which is not the way you would have imagined such a thing happened.
Gave it over to women to do.
Yeah. For this, there's no source for that. That we don't have a source for. Okay, so now that ends our presentation in terms of the Megillah. And now I want to move to the next phase.
The images were hammered out of a plate?
Yes, so take a copper plate, hammer out the image, and then you use that as a mold. Yeah. Okay. It's no different. The same thing.
Now too, they do not real art and fake art. They do both.
On Megillah.
On Megillah, yeah.
Interessant. Okay, here we have a book that was printed in 1728 in French. Dictionary, history, critique, chronology, geography of the Bible, put out by a Christian named Augustin Calmet. And he has over here entry on many different inyanim in the Torah, including in PHR on Purim. And here he describes what Purim is. But the real treat that we get in this book is this. And what's this? He went to the shul in Amsterdam, and he made a copper engraving of what he saw, and he put this in his book. I'm going to show you, this is the way it is in the book. Let me show you a cleaned up version of this. So behind all the way in the front, it looks like there's an Aron Kodesh with nothing inside. That's open with nothing inside. In the middle, there's someone with a long, I'm not sure what type of dress that is, who's presumably reading a big Megillah that's in front of him. We'll zoom up soon and you'll see. On the extremes of right and left, there's bars, if you want to call it that, but that's the women's section, and the women are there. And then around are the people in the shul. But I don't know if you're able to see. If you look at the front, on the right side, there's a kid banging something on a bench. If you look in the front, in the middle, there's some banging going on a rock over there. We're going to take a closer look at what it says. So here's the caption that it says: children strike mallets is hammers, on benches and create a very loud noise each time the name of Haman is pronounced. That's what he writes there. And here he writes, a stone that they set at the synagogue's entrance, upon which was written the name of Haman, and they would smash it with small rocks. So this minig we know of. Children strike mallets, right, making noise. This is not something we're normally familiar with. Here is the image of a boy banging on a bench. Okay, so he's making noise. This is his gragger. He's banging with a hammer on a bench. And here is a closer up of, you see on the right side, some older people banging with hammers on a bench as well. And here you have a better view of the big, huge Megillah that is sitting on the bima, and the dress of the men you're better able to see in this image as well.
What year was this?
1728.
Is this the Portuguese short?
Yeah. This is the Spanish-Portuguese shul. On the left side, you see some more banging going on over here. Okay, and then if you go further here, this is the most interesting part. You have a rock of sorts that says Aman, and they're banging rocks on this rock, and it looks like it's a ruckus that's going on over here. So what's going on here? Answer: go way back to the Sefer Amanim in the 1100s. Minigat hinoikis betzarfas Provenza in France and in Provence, lakachas chaluke anacha, which means to take stones, v'lichtav aleim Haman, and to write Haman on the stone, umakishin zu al zu, and they bang them one onto the other, kisha koida maskir Haman v'rishoy, when the Baal Koira reads out about Haman and his wickedness, v'shem rishoy and yirkav, and this is the idea of erasing the name of the wicked. In other words, the banging of Haman did actually not start out as making noise. It wasn't about making noise. It was about erasing Haman's name b'ksav. The way they erased Haman's name b'ksav was with making noise, because you were taking rocks and banging it against each other. Shulchan Aruch says the same thing. They make an image of Haman, or they write his name, so that his name gets erased. It brings the pasuk of Amalek and brings the pasuk of Shem Rishayim Yirka. And then he says, Umizen nishtar. It's very unusual for the Shulchan Aruch to give you the history, the development of the minig. Umizen nishtar b'haminig. From there, the minig evolved. Shamakin Haman kishakarim amilei takmes. That's the second iteration. Initially, it was about erasing. So if you go back to this image, this is how it started. You have a rock. It says Haman. The idea was erasing. Oh, they're making noise. I can make noise. I can make noise with hammers. So here you already had both of the minhagim. For whatever reason, in many communities, this fell away, and people aren't doing this anymore. But it's a cool. Yeah. But this is a very interesting thing that we get to have this visual evidence, because this non-Jew went to visit this shul, and sometimes you would say, what does he know? It's a non-Jew, he's not doing it right. And here you see, these guys, sometimes they did a very good job, and sometimes you're able to learn amazing things from these things.
What is that picture?
So that's, if you want to go to the source, you just...
What is it? Like, how do they...
It's a copper, same thing. It's a copper engraving. You would take a sheet of copper, you would have to chisel it out, and then it's your model, and then you're banging it against others.
He's doing it on the spot?
No. He probably went, he maybe did a sketch with a pencil on a paper, and then went home to work on it.
I think it's essentially a painting.
To a degree. Yeah.
It's a work of art.
Yeah, it's definitely a work of art. Okay. Next item I'd like to show you also relates to a non-Jew visiting a Jewish situation on Purim. This is from earlier. There was a non-Jew, an English non-Jew by the name of Lancelot Addison. And he was a chaplain in the British Army, and the British Army was in Morocco. So he was with them in Morocco, and he went to a shul, or he learned about Yidden. So he wrote a book, The Present State of the Jews, he wrote a sefer about what Jews are doing. And it was printed in the year 1656. And here he has an account of Purim. So he writes as follows. First of all, the S's in Old English, and they look like F's, but they're really S's. So, on the paragraph on page 179 on the left side, he writes like this. In the celebration of this feast, they at present use these ceremonies. First, they light up great store of lamps. So there are a lot of oil in the shul. That they may something their joy. And read over the book of Esther, at which both women and children are bound to be present. Okay, he knows. Women and children have to be on the Megillah. Who at the naming of Haman make an hideous noise, beating with their hands and stamping with their feet, and at the same time pronouncing the words, let his name be blotted out. I remember reading this like, no, not true. We don't say those words. Well, guess what? The Levush. Shem Haman, Yoimer Hashemeya, Shem Rishayim Yirkav. Okay, so there was a minig that you used to say this during the time of the Megillah. That's also something that from, I don't know if it exists in other communities. Okay, the Levush didn't think it's hafsik. Others didn't think it's hafsik. Okay, if you go weiter over here, let his name be blotted out. Let the name of the ungodly come to naught. Cursed be Haman, blessed be Mordechai, cursed be Zeresh, but blessed be Esther, cursed be the idolaters, and blessed be all Israelites. Which maledictions are now applied to Christians? Okay, so what's he saying? Arurim, Kol HaRashayim, and Arur Haman, they're thinking about us. He's writing for a Christian audience as well. Okay, we have other evidence of this. Look at here is from the Reb Rachamim Nisim Yitzchak Palaji, who was a rabbi in Izmir, which today is in Turkey. In his Sefer Yafel Alev, he writes like this: this year, in 1875, the rabbis of our city put out an announcement that no one should bang when Haman's name is said, because we're afraid of sakana from non-Jews who are going to come up with a libel against us as Pesach is approaching. So what do you see from here? That this was not random. That actually Christians did, it seemed, took offense to this whole banging of Haman. They thought it's talking to them, and they didn't like it. And so therefore here in Izmir, at this time and place, they said no to this idea. He goes on to say, I want to just read one more thing from here. When they come out of the synagogue, bottom left paragraph, they fall to eating and drinking, and are therein much more liberal at this than any other time. And they have a rule that at the feast of Purim, they should drink till they cannot distinguish between cursed be Haman and blessed be Mordechai. And he goes on to describe very nice and beautiful account of Moroccan Jews in the 1600s. These are special things. And again, you see this accuracy. You see this accuracy here. Okay. The last part of our presentation will be about the minig to dress up on Purim. The minig to dress up on Purim. The oldest evidence, visual evidence, about dressing up on Purim that we have comes from this Mishnah Torah. Maybe some of you recognize it, because by the Siyam Rambam that we made, I showed you some images of this copy of the Mishnah Torah. This was made in Italy sometime in the 1400s. On the left side, it seems to me, is Sukkot. This is the title page of Sefer Zmanim, so it's the Yom Tovim. So the left side is Sukkot. On the right side, there are people who are in costume. There are people in costume. All the way on the left looks like it's a jester, looks like someone who's an entertainer, but even the other ones look that they're wearing some sort of costumes. So this is the oldest visual expression of this idea that we have. Now, right around this time, in the 1400s, in Italy, was a major controversy about dressing up on Purim. What was the controversy? So first of all, I want you to notice two things here. There are no children that are dressed up here. These are adults. These are adults that are dressed up, and the men and women are together. This leads to the controversy. There was a Rav by the name of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi Mintz. He passed away in the year 1508. So mamish during the time that this manuscript was produced. And on the left side is a title page of his tshuvas that were printed in 1553. And on the right side, here you see his tshuva. Advar lebishas hapartzufim, wearing masks. Shenoigin lilbosh bachurim v'gamasulas hakenim in the orim. Older people. Okay, so you see, older people are getting dressed up on Purim with masks. What was the issue? There was a Rav who said, this is a terrible idea, we need a stoppage. Even why? Because you don't know who the person is, and they could do anything. You're at a party, and great, you could dress, once you have a mask on, there's no shame, you could do whatever you want, including inappropriate moves. And then, later on in the tshuva, he says, I want to justify the minig. He says that there's Gdoilim v'chasidei olam, shenis gadalti etzlam, great Jews, asher ro b'neim u'b'neiseim, they saw their children, chasneim v'kaliseim, sons-in-law and daughters-in-law, loivshin oisam partzufim, wearing the masks, v'shinu bigdeim bigdei ish lebigdei isha, and what we call cross-dressing. And this was the big discussion. Is it okay to wear a mask in a mixed company? And is it okay to cross-dress? It's a cross-dress. So he wanted to say that it's mutter on Purim. All year it's usher, it's mutter on Purim. We know that he's arguing. Other Rabbanim were saying, not a good idea. This was another big debate that was happening at this time. The actual learning of the tshuvas and the arguments back and forth is beyond the scope of what we need to get into today. Here is another, I want to show you another from a little later, the concept of dressing up in minhagim. So what happened is that sometime in the 1400s, there was a Yid of Isaac Katirna who wrote a sefer on minhagim. Minhagim Pashit, what do you do day to day? And this was translated into Yiddish by a man named Reb Shimon Alevi Ginsburg, and this copy here was printed in Venice in 1600. It actually says Venedig, but I figured out that in German, Venice is Venedig. So this was printed in Venice, and this is the title page, and here you have the Minhagim for Purim, the brachas of the Megillah, and you see there is masks and dress up and music going on over here. Here's a closer up. All the way on the right, I don't know if that's blackface, but if it is, then we should cancel this guy. If it's just a mask, then it's a different story. You see they're wearing their musical instruments that are going on over here. On the left is also a mask. Okay, it could be they're all wearing masks. You look really well. It looks like they all have something on their face. All adults. The idea that dressing up is only for children, that's a much later iteration. In fact, if you look at the first 300 years, all of the examples of dressing up for Purim, they're always adults that are in the Purim. Here's another example. Here you do have one child, but again, two adults with dressing up. These guys look like clowns. Very often they're with music as well. In terms of the custom of what's going on over here? It looks like he's blowing some sort of wind instrument. He is holding a jug that looks like an alcoholic beverage. That would be my guess.
No, it looks like there's wine in it. There's half full.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know. This is a woodcut, by the way, which is even less. It's less fine. It's the same concept, but they're not able to express delicate things in these woodcuts. So I don't know.
The Christians were doing carnival.
So what's the dressing up? Dressing up began, if you learn the tshuva of what's his name, of Ma'ari Mintz, you see that it's about simcha. It's about simcha. That's really what it's about. It's about just increasing the joy of Yom Tov. Has to be done in a permitted way, and he doesn't think it's going to lead to inappropriate things. That's his argument. He doesn't think it's going to lead to inappropriate things. But what is it about him? But then you see a shift. You see that rather than using it as a means for simcha, all of a sudden we're looking for a symbolic meaning in it. Which is, it's not about the simcha anymore. Now it's about, we're trying to commemorate something, we're trying to convey something. And that shift happens here with the Elya Rabbah. The Elya Rabbah, again, I've quoted him before, late 1600s, early 1700s. He brings over here, he's bringing reasons for, it's like the atmosphere of this is the way you increase joy in the room. That's not his approach. His approach is, we're trying to commemorate something. And he writes, we're trying to commemorate the fact that Mordechai yatsa b'levush malchus, or that Vashti got pimples or a tail, so that's also al derech a thing. So it's about invoking and remembering elements of the nes. And then you get the piece from Reb Moshe Chagiz, very famous piece. He lived, again, very similar, Kufa, late 1600s, early first half of the 1700s. He wrote a sefer called Eila Mitzvahs, and in this sefer of Eila Mitzvahs, he writes all the different, he goes through all the Taryag Mitzvahs, and here he deals with the lav of Loi Silbash. So because he's in with the lav of Loi Silbash, of not cross-dressing, he gets into the discussion of is this permitted on Purim or not. And along the way, he discusses why do we get dressed up on Purim. And what he says is as follows. He says like this, we're trying to remember the Gemara, we're trying to invoke the Gemara about the story of Purim. Because the Gemara asks, why the Talmidim of Rosh Shimon Bar Yochai asked, why was there a gzeira on death on the entire generation? And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai answered that the because of Hishtachavu L'Tzelem, that because they bowed to the Tzelem. And in this discussion, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says that they only did it, they didn't really mean it, and also Hashem didn't really mean it. In other words, it was a tit for tat, where I didn't really mean the idol, I didn't really mean I'm annihilating you. This is what the Gemara says. So he takes this idea that Moshe Chagiz, and he says this is why we do the dress up. Because the Yidden were dressing up, essentially. A Yid serves the Eibishter, loyal to God. And what did the Jews do? Said that because the circumstances will be untrue to who we are, because we need to, for whatever reason, we need to bow to the idol. And we need to go to the party or whatever it is. So they did that. And then the Eibishter loves Jews. He wants to preserve the Yidden. Okay, but for whatever, he pretended for those few minutes that he wants to chas v'shalom annihilate the Jewish people. So because the theme of the story is about pretending, so therefore on Purim we wear clothes and we're pretending. He then goes on to say So Ebazoi, if it's so significant, so maybe it's not the end of the world if there's men wearing women's clothes and the other way around. But then he goes further and says, but look for Achashverosh. Achashverosh had two separate parties, one for men and one for women. So I think not. I think it's better that we have separation, and it shouldn't be where we're mixing mixing the sexes. Al Kopanim, what you see from here is that it seems to be a shift away from the idea of the carnival atmosphere, or the Simcha atmosphere, and more toward looking to specific narratives of the Purim story and deriving meaning from there. So building off of this last point, the lesson that I think that Moshe Chagiz would want us to walk away with when we see people dressed up or when we dress up on Purim is that ultimately it's a very empowering point, because every person ultimately makes choices and does things that's not them. That's not them at a certain time. And it's like we're putting on a certain mask. And it's important to know that, because when we confuse that and when we assume and we think that those things that we need to do, that really is us, so then that leads to negative things. We don't want to that way. It's very important to keep the distinction between who we are and then the things that for whatever reason we ended up doing. Okay, it happened, but it was just your costume. It was just your costume. It's not who you are. And I think that's an important hayra that we could walk away with. So just come back to the main point that I tried to stress a few times, is to find ourselves in the story. I think I showed you a few examples of Jews throughout the generations doing that, whether it was 2,000 years ago in Persia, whether it was in the margins of a Bible, of a Tanakh, or whether it was the margins of a master or in the frames around the Megillah, trying to find how the story means something and can mean something empowering for us today. Wow, exact timing.